A little boy stumbled out of the woods onto a dark highway, crying and barefoot. He ran straight to 8 bikers and grabbed their jackets. "Please follow me home," he begged, his voice shaking. The bikers looked at each other, then followed him down a dirt path into the darkness. They had no idea their lives were about to change forever. The sun was setting behind the hills when Jack saw the boy. At first he thought it was a deer. Something small and fast darting between the pine trees that lined Interstate 40. But deer don't scream. Brake. Jack's voice cut through the roar of 8 Harley engines. The Iron Riders came to a thundering halt, their bikes groaning and spitting gravel. Dust swirled around them like smoke. Jack pulled off his helmet, his gray beard catching the last light of day. Behind him, 7 more bikers did the same, their faces confused, annoyed. "What the hell, Jack?" Vince called out, wiping sweat from his dark forehead. Jack didn't answer. He was already off his bike. The boy stumbled out from the trees. He couldn't have been more than 9 years old. His dark face was streaked with tears and dirt, his clothes torn at the knees. He was barefoot. His feet were bleeding. "Please," the boy's voice cracked. "Please, you have to help." Jack knelt down, his leather jacket creaking. "Hey, kid, slow down. What's wrong?" "My mom. She won't wake up." The boy grabbed Jack's vest with both hands, his fingers shaking. "Please follow me home. Please. I don't know what to do." The other bikers exchanged glances. This wasn't in the plan. They just finished a 10-hour charity ride for veterans, raising money for prosthetics and PTSD counseling. Everyone was tired, hungry, ready to hit the bar in town and call it a night. But something in the boy's eyes stopped them cold. "Where's home, son?" Jack asked gently. The boy pointed down a dirt path that split off from the main road. It disappeared into thick woods, barely visible in the fading light. "How far? 10 minutes? Maybe less if we run." The boy's voice was desperate, rising. "But I can't carry her. I tried. She's too heavy and Lila is too scared to come out and I don't have a phone." Okay. Jack put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We'll follow you, but you're riding with me. Those feet aren't taking you anywhere." The boy nodded frantically. Jack looked back at his crew. Vince, his second in command, was already nodding. Alex, the youngest at 23, looked uncertain. Bear, the giant with the scarred face, cracked his knuckles. The others, Thorn, Shadow, Colossus, and Falcon, sat silent on their bikes, waiting for Jack's call. "We follow the kid," Jack said simply. "Something's wrong." "Could be a setup," Shadow muttered. "He was the paranoid one, always had been. Spent too many years in places where trust got you killed." "Set up for what?" Bear growled. "Kid's barefoot and bleeding. Look at him. I'm just saying." "We follow," Jack repeated, his voice harder now. "Anyone got a problem with that? Turn around. No one's stopping you." Nobody moved. Jack lifted the boy onto his bike, settling him in front. "What's your name?" "Marcus. All right, Marcus? Hold on tight. You're going to show us where to go." The bikes roared back to life. Marcus pointed, and Jack turned down the dirt path. The others followed in single file, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The path was rougher than it looked. Tree roots buckled the ground. Branches scraped against leather and chrome. After 5 minutes, Vince pulled up beside Jack. "This doesn't feel right," Vince said, his voice barely audible over the engines. Jack knew what he meant. The deeper they went, the more isolated it became. No streetlights, no houses, just trees and darkness pressing in from all sides. Marcus suddenly pointed there. That's it. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, was a farmhouse. It might have been white once, but now the paint was peeling like dead skin. The porch sagged in the middle. One window was covered with cardboard. The yard was overgrown with weeds taller than Marcus. The bikers killed their engines. The silence was immediate and heavy. Jack helped Marcus down. The boy ran toward the house, then stopped, turning back with panic in his eyes. "Hurry, please." The Iron Riders moved as one, following Marcus up the broken porch steps. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully closed. Inside, the smell hit them first. Stale air, unwashed clothes, something sour and sharp that made Alex gag. The living room was a disaster. Dirty dishes were piled on every surface, clothes scattered across the floor, and on a sagging brown couch, slumped against the armrest, was a woman. She was thin, too thin. Her brown skin was pale gray in the dim light. Her hair hung in greasy strands across her face. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. "Mom." Marcus ran to her, shaking her shoulder. "Mom, wake up. I brought help." She didn't respond. Vince was already kneeling beside her, his fingers on her neck, checking her pulse. He'd been a medic in Iraq before the Iron Riders. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, tilting her head back, checking her breathing. "She's alive," Vince said, "but her pulse is weak. Really weak." "What happened to her?" Jack asked Marcus. "I don't know." Tears streamed down the boy's face. "She was fine this morning. Then she got really tired. She said she was just gonna rest. But then she wouldn't wake up." Bear moved through the house, his heavy boots thumping on the warped floorboards. He disappeared down a hallway. "Jack." Alex's voice was quiet. He was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, his face pale. "You need to see this." Jack walked over. The kitchen was worse than the living room. The sink was full of dishes covered in mold. The trash can overflowed onto the floor, but that wasn't what Alex was showing him. He was pointing at the cupboards. All of them were open. All of them were empty. Not a single can of food. Not a box of cereal. Nothing. "They've got no food," Alex whispered. "Nothing." A crash came from the back of the house. Everyone spun around. "It's okay," Bear called out. "Just found the sister." He emerged from the hallway carrying a little girl who couldn't have been older than 6. She was wrapped in a dirty blanket, her eyes wide with terror. She was shaking. She was hiding under the bed. Bear said softly, his massive arms cradling her like she weighed nothing. "Won't talk. Just keep staring." Jack's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot in his 52 years. Done things he wasn't proud of. Lived through things most people couldn't imagine. But this hit different. "Where's your dad, Marcus?" Jack asked, keeping his voice calm. Marcus's face crumpled. "He left. 4 days ago. He said he was going to buy cigarettes. He didn't come back." Vince looked up from the mother. "You've been alone for 4 days." Marcus nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Mom kept saying he'd be back. She kept waiting. But then she ran out of her medicine and she got sick and..." His voice broke. "I didn't know what to do. Lila was so hungry. I gave her the last can of soup yesterday. Then there was nothing left." The bikers stood frozen in the ruined house. 8 hardened men suddenly faced with something none of them were prepared for. Jack looked at the unconscious mother, at the terrified little girl in Bear's arms. At Marcus, who'd run into a road and flagged down strangers because he had no one else. "Vince," Jack said quietly. "Can you help her?" Vince was already reaching for his phone. Then he stopped, looking at the screen. "No signal." "Of course there isn't," Shadow muttered. Jack made a decision. "All right, here's what we do. Vince, you stay with the mother. Keep her stable. Bear, you and Alex take my bike and get back to town. Find a doctor who will come out here. Don't take no for an answer." "And the rest of us?" Thorne asked. Jack looked at Marcus and Lila, two kids who'd been abandoned and forgotten, left to survive on their own in a house with no food and a dying mother. "We stay," Jack said. "We don't leave them alone. Not tonight." Nobody argued. Whatever they'd been expecting when they left on that charity ride this morning, it wasn't this. But here they were, and something told Jack that this night was just the beginning. The first hour crawled by like a wounded animal. Vince worked on the mother while the others searched the house. What they found made Jack's blood run cold. In the bathroom, Falcon discovered a collection of orange pill bottles scattered across the counter. He brought them to Vince, who read the labels with growing concern. Antidepressants, anxiety medication, pain pills. Vince shook his head. "Some of these are months old. She hasn't been refilling them." "Why not?" Jack asked. Vince held up one bottle, showing him the price sticker still attached. $60, without insurance. He gestured at the other bottles. "She's probably been choosing between medicine and food. And the father chose cigarettes and never came back," Shadow said darkly from the doorway. In the mother's bedroom, Thorne found something that made him call for Jack. Inside a shoebox under the bed were past due notices. Electric bill 3 months overdue. Water bill 2 months. Property tax notice stamped in red. Final warning. But it was the envelope at the bottom that stopped Jack cold. Inside was a single photograph, a family picture, maybe 2 years old. The mother looked healthy then, smiling. The father stood beside her, tall, broad-shouldered with cold eyes, even in a happy photo. Marcus and Lila were tiny, grinning at the camera. On the back, someone had written in shaky handwriting. Before everything fell apart, Jack slipped the photo back and returned to the living room. Marcus sat on the floor beside his mother, holding her hand. Lila had finally allowed herself to be set down, but she stayed pressed against Bear's leg, clutching his jeans with small fists. "Marcus," Jack said gently, sitting across from him, "I need you to tell me what happened. All of it." The boy's lip trembled. "Dad lost his job last year at the factory. He started drinking more. Him and Mom fought all the time." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. He hit her sometimes, when he was real mad. Jack's hands clenched into fists. Beside him, Shadow's jaw tightened. "Mom got sad after that," Marcus continued. "Real sad. She stopped going places, stopped cooking. Dad said she was weak, that she needed to get over it." Tears rolled down his cheeks. "Then 4 days ago they had the biggest fight ever. He said he was done. Said we were dragging him down. He took his truck and left." "Did he take anything with him?" Vince asked. Marcus nodded. "The money jar. It had like $300 in it. Mom was saving it for Lila's medicine. She gets sick a lot." As if on cue, Lila coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Vince's head snap up. "How long has she been coughing like that?" 2 weeks, maybe?" Marcus said. "Mom said we'd take her to the doctor when Dad came back with money." Jack stood up and walked to the front porch, needing air. Falcon followed him out. They stood in silence, watching the darkness beyond the porch light. Moths circled overhead, throwing strange shadows. "I've got a daughter," Falcon said quietly. He rarely spoke about his past. "She's 20 now. I haven't seen her in 8 years." Jack glanced at him. "I was a lousy father," Falcon continued. "Drunk most of the time, angry the rest of it. Her mother finally kicked me out. Best thing she ever did." He lit a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. "These kids, they remind me of what I put my little girl through." Before Jack could respond, Thorne stuck his head out the door. "Bear and Alex are back with a doctor." The doctor was a woman in her 50s carrying a leather bag that looked older than Marcus. Her name was Dr. Singh, and she didn't flinch at the sight of 8 bikers crowded into the tiny house. She examined the mother in silence, checking her vitals, her eyes, her pulse. Then she turned to Vince. You stabilized her? Yes, ma'am. Good work. She's severely malnourished and dehydrated. She also missed several doses of her medications, which caused her blood sugar to crash. Dr. Singh pulled out an IV kit. I can hydrate her and give her something to stabilize her, but she needs to be in a hospital. Will she be okay? Marcus's voice was small. Dr. Singh's expression softened. If we get her help, yes. But son, I need to ask you something. Where are your other relatives? Grandparents? Aunts? Uncles? Marcus shook his head. Mom's parents died before I was born. Dad's family doesn't talk to us. He said they were dead to him. Dr. Singh and Jack exchanged a look. I have to report this, the doctor said quietly. These children can't stay here alone. Child services will need to be involved. No. Marcus jumped up, his face panicked. They'll take us away. They'll split us up. I heard kids at school talking about foster care. They said brothers and sisters get separated. He ran to Jack, grabbing his vest just like he had on the road. Please don't let them take Lila. She needs me. I'm all she has. Lila, hearing her name, began to cry. Not loud, but a quiet, hopeless sound that was somehow worse. Jack looked around at his crew, at Falcon, haunted by his own failures as a father, at Vince, still kneeling beside the mother, at Bear, who was gently patting Lila's back, at Thorn, Shadow, Colossus, and Alex, all of them watching him, waiting. They were outlaws, ex-cons, some of them, men with records and reputations, not the kind of people the system trusted. But right now, they were all these kids had. Doc, Jack said slowly. What if they weren't alone? What if someone stayed with them until the mother recovered? Doctor, Singh raised an eyebrow. You mean you? I mean us. A long silence fell over the room. Then Bear spoke up, his voice surprisingly gentle. I'm in. Yeah, Vince added. Me too. One by one, the others nodded. Dr. Singh looked at them for a long moment. These rough men in leather and chains now promising to watch over 2 abandoned children. I'll give you tonight, she finally said. But tomorrow we figure out a real solution. Understood? Jack nodded. Understood. As Dr. Singh worked on the mother, the bikers settled in for a long night. They had entered this broken house as strangers, but somehow in the span of a few hours, they'd become something else. Guardians, protectors, a family that nobody expected. The mother woke up at 4 a.m. Jack was dozing in a chair by the window when he heard her gasp. Vince was at her side instantly, his medic instincts sharp even after minimal sleep. Easy, Vince said softly. You're okay, just breathe. Her eyes darted around the room, wild with confusion and fear. Then she saw Marcus asleep on the floor beside the couch, wrapped in someone's leather jacket. Her face crumbled. Marcus, she whispered, reaching for him with a shaking hand. He's fine, Jack said, moving closer. Your boy saved your life. He flagged us down on the highway. She looked at Jack, really looked at him, taking in the tattoos on his forearms, the gray beard, the Iron Rider's patch on his vest. Fear flickered across her face. Who are you? Some guys passing through, Jack said. Your son needed help. We helped. Where's... She stopped, her voice catching. Where's my husband? The question hung in the air like smoke. He's not here, Vince said carefully. Marcus said he left 4 days ago. Something broke in her expression. Not surprise, just a deep, bone-tired acceptance, like she'd been waiting for this confirmation. He's not coming back, is he? Her voice was barely audible. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her hollow cheeks. I knew. I think I always knew, but I kept telling the kids. I kept saying he'd come back. Ma'am, Jack started. Shauna, she interrupted. My name is Shauna. Shauna, Jack said gently. You've been really sick. Dr. Singh came by. She said you need proper medical care. Shauna's eyes snapped open. A doctor? How are we going to pay for a doctor? We don't have insurance. We don't have anything. Panic rose in her voice. Oh, God. The bills, the house, the kids. Shauna, stop. Vince put a hand on her shoulder. Right now, you need to focus on getting better. We'll figure out the rest. You don't understand. They'll take my babies. Shauna tried to sit up, but she was too weak. If they find out Derek left, if they know I can't take care of them, they'll take them away from me. Nobody's taking anybody. Bear rumbled from the doorway. Lila was asleep against his chest, her small body rising and falling with his breaths. Shauna stared at the massive, scarred man holding her daughter with such gentleness, and fresh tears came. Why are you helping us? She asked. You don't even know us. Jack thought about that question. Why were they here? They could have called 911 from the road and left. They could have dropped the kids at a fire station and disappeared. That's what smart people would have done. But none of them had even suggested it. Because your son asked us to, Jack said simply, and he was brave enough to trust strangers when he had no other choice. Seemed wrong to let him down. Outside, dawn was starting to break. The other bikers were scattered around the property, Thorne checking the perimeter, Shadow trying to get the ancient well pump working, Colossus and Alex attempting to fix the sagging porch steps with whatever scraps they'd found in the barn. Falcon walked in carrying grocery bags. He'd left on his bike an hour ago without a word. Now he unpacked bread, milk, eggs, peanut butter, apples. Convenience store 20 miles down the highway, he explained, avoiding everyone's eyes. Figured the kids would need breakfast. Shauna watched him stock the empty cupboards, her lips trembling. I can't pay you back. I don't have money for groceries. Didn't ask you to pay, Falcon said gruffly. Marcus stirred, woken by the voices. He sat up, saw his mother awake, and scrambled to her side. Mom, you're okay. Oh, baby. Shauna pulled him close, breathing in the smell of his hair. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. It's okay, Marcus said, but his voice was tight with tears he'd been holding back for days. You're awake now. Everything's going to be okay. Jack stepped out onto the porch, needing air. Vince followed. They stood watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It would have been beautiful if the situation wasn't so ugly. We got a problem, Vince said quietly. I know. Dr. Singh is going to report this. She has to. And when Child Services shows up, Vince trailed off. We're bikers, Jack. Ex-cons, half of us. They're not going to let us anywhere near these kids once the system gets involved. I know, Jack repeated. They'll separate them. Marcus and Lila, different foster homes. Probably. Vince's voice was tight. Shauna will lose custody. She's got no job, no husband, no support system. The state will take them and that'll be that. Jack's hands gripped the porch railing. So what do you want me to do, Vince? We can't kidnap them. We can't hide them. And we sure as hell can't adopt them ourselves. I'm not saying I have answers, Vince shot back. I'm just saying we made those kids a promise last night. And come tomorrow, we're going to break it. The front door creaked open. Marcus stood there, his small frame silhouetted in the doorway. Are you leaving? His voice was small, scared. Jack turned. No, son, we're not leaving. But I heard you talking about tomorrow, about people coming to take us. Damn. The kid had been listening. Marcus walked onto the porch, his bare feet careful on the broken boards. He looked up at Jack with eyes that had seen too much for 9 years old. My dad used to make promises, Marcus said quietly. He promised he'd stop drinking. Promised he'd stop hitting Mom. Promised he'd get better. His voice cracked. He promised he wouldn't leave us. Jack crouched down to Marcus's level. I'm not your dad. I know. Marcus wiped his nose. But grown-ups always leave. That's what they do. Something twisted in Jack's chest. He thought about Falcon's daughter, who probably said the same thing about him, about all the promises he'd broken in his own life, about all the people he'd let down. "Listen to me," Jack said firmly. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't promise you everything's going to be perfect, but I can promise you this. We're not going to let them split you and Lila up, and we're not going to let anybody hurt you. You understand?" "How?" Marcus asked. "How can you stop them?" Jack stood up, looking at Vince, then back at the boy. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but we're going to figure it out." Inside the house, Lila started crying. Shauna's weak voice tried to comfort her. Bear's deep rumble joined in, and somehow, impossibly, the little girl's cries turned to giggles. Marcus's eyes widened. Lila's laughing. She hasn't laughed in weeks. Vince and Jack exchanged a glance. Maybe they couldn't fix everything. Maybe the system would win in the end. But right now, in this moment, they'd given these kids something they desperately needed. Hope. And Jack would be damned if he let that die without a fight. By nightfall, the farmhouse looked almost livable. The bikers had worked through the day like men possessed. Shadow fixed the water pump, cursing and bloodying Knuckles until it finally coughed to life. Thorn and Colossus patched the roof where rain had been leaking into Lila's bedroom. Alex cleaned out the kitchen until it no longer smelled like death. Shauna watched from the couch, too weak to do much but cry quietly at their kindness. Dr. Singh returned at dusk to check on her. The doctor's expression was unreadable as she took in the transformed house, the stocked cupboards, the children eating peanut butter sandwiches at a table that had been scrubbed clean. "I made the call," Dr. Singh said quietly to Jack on the porch. "Child services will be here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Jack's jaw tightened. "And then what? They'll assess the situation, interview Shauna, check the house." She paused. "Look, I know what you're trying to do here. But these children need stability, a support system. Shauna needs psychiatric care, consistent medication, a path back to employment. That's not something you can provide with good intentions and elbow grease, so we just hand them over. I'm saying the system exists for a reason." Dr. Singh's voice softened. "I know it's not perfect, but it's better than 2 kids living in poverty with a mother who can't care for them, and a father who's a coward," Jack finished. "Yeah, we got that part." Dr. Singh left them with that truth hanging in the air. As darkness fell, the bikers gathered around a fire pit in the backyard. Someone had found wood. Someone else had found marshmallows at the convenience store. Lila sat on Bear's lap, her small hands sticky with melted sugar. Marcus leaned against Jack, fighting sleep. Inside, Shauna had finally drifted off, exhausted from her first real meal in days. "So what's the plan?" Thorn asked, breaking the silence. "We're just going to let them take the kids tomorrow? What choice do we have?" Alex said. His young face looked older in the firelight. "We can't fight the government." "The hell we can't," Shadow muttered. "And say what?" Vince challenged. "That 8 bikers with criminal records want to babysit someone else's kids? They'll laugh us out of the county." Colossus spoke up, his voice quiet. "My cousin works in family services, over in Clayton County." He poked at the fire with a stick. "She told me once that they always try to keep families together. It's the first priority. But they need to see a support structure, someone who can help the parent get back on their feet." "Shauna doesn't have anyone," Falcon said. "That's the whole problem. No," Jack said slowly, an idea forming. "She's got us." Everyone turned to look at him. "Think about it," Jack continued. "We're the Iron Riders. We do charity work all the time. Veterans, homeless shelters, toy drives at Christmas. It's literally what we were doing when we found these kids." "So?" Shadow asked. "So we make this our new project." Jack's voice gained confidence. "We tell child services we're the support network. We'll help with repairs, groceries, transportation to appointments. We'll make sure Shauna has what she needs to get better. We'll prove the kids don't need to be taken away because their mother isn't alone anymore." Vince stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Vince said carefully. "That's not a weekend project. That's a commitment. Months, maybe years. That means regular check-ins, background checks, social worker visits. That means showing up when it's not convenient, when it's boring, when it's hard." Jack looked around the fire at his crew, at Falcon, who abandoned his own daughter, at Bear, who spent 10 years in prison for nearly killing a man in a bar fight, at Thorn, who had anger issues that ended his marriage, at Shadow, who trusted no one, at Colossus and Alex, both running from pasts they never talked about. Broken men, all of them. Men who'd made mistakes. Men who'd hurt people. But also men who'd spent the last 24 hours fixing a house for strangers. Who'd bought groceries they couldn't afford. Who'd held crying children and made promises they had no business making. "I'm not saying we're going to be perfect," Jack said. "I'm saying we're going to try. And maybe that's enough." "It won't be easy," Vince warned. "Nothing worth doing is." Bear cleared his throat. Everyone looked at the giant man who rarely spoke. Lila had fallen asleep in his arms, her thumb in her mouth, completely trusting. "I vote yes," Bear said simply. "This little girl needs us. I'm in," Falcon said immediately. One by one, the others nodded, even Shadow after a long pause. "We're going to need a better pitch than trust us. We're bikers," Vince said. "Child services aren't going to be impressed by good intentions. Then we show them more than intentions," Jack said. "Tomorrow morning, we show them results." They spent the next 3 hours planning. Vince would handle the medical angle, explaining Shauna's conditions and treatment plan. Colossus would contact his cousin for inside advice on what social workers look for. Thorn would document all the repairs they'd done with photos and receipts. Alex would research local resources, food banks, counseling services, job training programs. Jack would talk to Shauna and convince her to fight. Around midnight, the others drifted off to sleep, some on the porch, some in their sleeping bags in the yard. Bear in the barn, with Lila still clinging to him like a koala. Jack found Marcus sitting alone on the back steps, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" Jack asked, sitting beside him. "I'm scared about tomorrow," Marcus admitted. "Me too, son." Marcus looked up at him, surprised. "Really?" "Really." Jack put an arm around the boy's thin shoulders. "But you know what? I spent my whole life being scared. Scared to change, scared to commit, scared to care about anything more than my bike and my next drink." He squeezed gently. "Then you ran out of those trees and grabbed my vest. And for the first time in 20 years, I was more scared of letting you down than I was of trying." "What if they don't listen?" Marcus whispered. "What if they take us anyway?" Jack didn't lie to him. He'd learned that much. "Then we'll figure out Plan B and Plan C and Plan D if we have to. But we won't stop fighting. That's the promise." Marcus leaned against him, and Jack felt the boy's shoulders shake with silent tears. All the fear and exhaustion and trauma of the past days finally breaking through. "It's okay," Jack said quietly. "Let it out. You've been strong for so long. You don't have to be strong right now." They sat there under the stars, a broken man and a broken boy, both trying to believe that tomorrow might be different. Inside the house, Shauna lay awake, listening to the sound of grown men snoring on her porch and in her yard. Strangers who'd become guardians, outlaws who'd become angels. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, she wasn't facing it alone. The social worker arrived in a white sedan at exactly 9 a.m. Her name was Karen Miller, and she looked exactly like someone who'd spent 20 years dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. Tired eyes, sensible shoes, a clipboard that might as well have been a weapon. She stopped short when she saw 8 motorcycles parked in the overgrown driveway. Jack stepped off the porch to meet her. He'd cleaned up, shaved, put on his least intimidating shirt under his vest. It didn't help much. He still looked like exactly what he was. "Ms. Miller, I'm Jack Thompson. We spoke on the phone with Dr. Singh." Karen's hand moved to her pepper spray. "You're the bikers." "Yes, ma'am. I was told there was one of you staying with the family temporarily." Her eyes swept over the motorcycles, the men emerging from the house and barn. "Not 8. Plans changed," Jack said evenly. "We'd like to talk to you about the children's situation." "I'm not here to talk to you, Mr. Thompson. I'm here to assess the welfare of 2 minors." She moved past him toward the house. Inside, Shauna sat on the couch with Lila on her lap, and Marcus pressed against her side. Vince stood nearby, looking professional in the button-down shirt he'd borrowed from Colossus. The house was clean, the cupboards stocked, the children fed and dressed in the cleanest clothes they owned. Karen's expression didn't change as she surveyed the scene. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Karen Miller from Child Protective Services. I need to ask you some questions. The interview was brutal." Karen asked about Derek's abandonment, Shauna's medical history, her psychiatric medications, her employment status, her support network. Shauna answered truthfully, her voice shaking, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to everything. The abuse, the poverty, the days she couldn't get out of bed. Marcus held his mother's hand through all of it. Karen took notes without emotion. Then she asked to speak with the children privately. "No," Marcus said immediately. "It's okay, baby," Shauna whispered. "It's not okay." Marcus's voice rose. "You're going to take us away. I know you are." Karen's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her armor. "Marcus, I need to make sure you and your sister are safe. That's my job. I just want to talk." "We are safe," Marcus insisted. "We're safe now. Because of them." He pointed at the bikers standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. Karen followed his gesture. "The bikers make you feel safe. They saved Mom's life. They brought us food. They fixed our house." Marcus's voice was fierce. "They didn't have to help us, but they did. And they're not leaving." Karen wrote something on her clipboard. "I'll need to speak with them as well." She interviewed each biker separately in the kitchen. Jack went first. "Mr. Thompson, what exactly is your relationship to this family? We met them 2 days ago. The boy flagged us down on the highway, and you decided to stay. Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Jack met her eyes. "Because they needed help, and we could give it. That's not a relationship. That's not family. That's strangers playing hero." Karen's voice was sharp. "These children need stability, consistency, not a motorcycle club that's going to get bored and ride off into the sunset. We're not going anywhere. You say that now. Everyone says that. Do you know how many times I've heard we'll take care of them from people who disappear within a week?" She leaned forward. "These are children, Mr. Thompson. Not a charity project. Not a way to feel good about yourselves." Jack's hands clenched under the table. "You're right. We are strangers. We have records. We're not the obvious choice." He took a breath. "But we're here. We showed up. And we're going to keep showing up. For how long? However long it takes." Karen interviewed Vince next, then Bear, then the others. By the time she finished, it was past noon. She asked to inspect the house, the bedrooms, the kitchen, the bathroom. She checked the water, the electricity, the food supply. She made notes about everything. Finally, she sat down with Shauna again. "Mrs. Williams, I'm going to be honest with you. This situation is unusual." Karen chose her words carefully. "Your children have been living in neglectful conditions. You have untreated mental health issues. You have no income and no immediate family support. Under normal circumstances, I would recommend immediate removal of the children pending investigation. Shauna's face crumbled. Lila began to cry. Marcus stood up, his small body shaking with rage and fear. However, Karen continued, raising a hand. The circumstances have changed significantly in 48 hours. The house is habitable. The children are fed and healthy, aside from Lila's cough, which Dr. Singh is treating. And you appear to have acquired a support system. Hope flickered across Shauna's face. Does that mean? It means I'm not removing the children today. Karen's voice was firm. But this is temporary. I will be conducting follow-up visits weekly at first. The house must remain in this condition. The children must have consistent food, clothing, and medical care. You must restart your psychiatric treatment and attend counseling. And these men, she gestured towards the bikers, they need to prove they're serious. How do we do that? Jack asked from the doorway. Karen stood, gathering her things. By still being here a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. She looked at each biker in turn. Because talk is cheap, Mr. Thompson. And children's lives are not. She handed Shauna a stack of papers, resources, food banks, counseling services, job training programs. Use them. Then she walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and turned back. I hope you understand what you're taking on, Karen said quietly. Because if you fail, if any of you disappear, if this house slides back into chaos, I won't hesitate. Those children will be placed in foster care, possibly separated. That's the reality. We understand, Jack said. Karen nodded once and left. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lila climbed down from Shauna's lap, walked over to Bear, and raised her arms. He picked her up, and she wrapped her small arms around his neck. You stayed, she whispered, her first words since they'd arrived. Bear's scarred face softened. Yeah, little bit. We stayed. Outside, they watched Karen's car disappear down the road. Well, Shadow said, that was terrifying. She's right, though, Vince added. We can't mess this up. Jack looked at the farmhouse, still shabby, still broken but standing, like the family inside it, like the men surrounding it. Then we won't, he said simply. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. 3 days later, Derek Williams walked into O'Donnell's bar on the edge of town. Word spread fast in small communities. By the time the sun set, half the town knew he was back. By the time Jack's phone rang, the whole Iron Riders crew knew too. You sure it's him? Jack asked Thorne, who'd gotten the call from a bartender who owed him a favor. Tall guy, brown jacket, driving a beat-up Ford with a dent in the passenger door, bragging about a poker win in Oklahoma. Thorne's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. It's him! Jack looked at the farmhouse. Through the window, he could see Shauna helping Marcus with homework at the kitchen table. Lila was coloring on the floor, Bear watching over her like a scarred guardian angel. Where is he now? Still at O'Donnell's, getting drunk on what's probably his kid's grocery money. Jack's jaw clenched. Get the others. But nobody does anything stupid. We just talk. Talk, Thorne repeated flatly. That's what I said. O'Donnell's bar was the kind of place where fights started and questions weren't asked. Dark wood, darker lighting, and the smell of stale beer and broken dreams. Derek Williams sat at the bar, laughing too loud, his arm around a woman who wasn't his wife. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that might have been handsome before bitterness and alcohol carved lines into it. He didn't notice the 6 bikers walk in until Jack sat down next to him. Derek Williams. Jack's voice was conversational. Derek turned, his eyes bleary. Who's asking? Someone who's been staying at your house taking care of your kids. Your wife. The smile dropped from Derek's face. He straightened, some of the drunkenness clearing. What the hell are you talking about? Who are you? The people who found your family 4 days after you abandoned them. Vince stood on Derek's other side. Your son was crying on the side of the highway. Your daughter was hiding under a bed. Your wife was unconscious. Derek's face flushed red. That's none of your damn business. You made it our business when you left them to die. Bear growled from behind. The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Derek stood up, swaying slightly. He was tall, but so was Bear, and Bear was sober. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to get out of my face. Sit down, Jack said quietly. Something in his tone made Derek hesitate. Jack wasn't threatening. He was simply stating fact. Derek sat. Here's what's going to happen. Jack continued. You're going to listen. You're going to listen to what your family went through while you were gambling away their food money in Oklahoma. You don't know. Your son is 9 years old. He found his mother unconscious. No food in the house. His sister coughing herself sick. He didn't know if his mom was dying. He didn't know where you were. He didn't even know if you were coming back. Jack leaned closer. So he ran onto a highway and begged strangers for help because he had no one else. Derek's face had gone pale. Lila, your daughter. She didn't speak for 2 days, just stared at nothing. You know what her first words were after we showed up? Vince's voice was hard. She said, "You stayed." Because that's what she's learned about adults. They leave. I was going to come back, Derek said. But his voice was weak. I just needed some space, some time to think. You stole $300, Thorne said flatly. Money Shauna was saving for Lila's medicine. You took it and ran. I was going to send money back. I just had bad luck at the tables. Stop. Jack's voice cut through the excuses like a knife. Just stop. You're not coming back to that house. You're not going anywhere near those kids. Derek's eyes narrowed. They're my kids. My wife. My house. You can't stop me from going home. Actually, a voice said from the doorway, they can. Sheriff Cole walked in, his hand resting on his belt near his gun. He was a weathered man in his 60s, someone who'd seen enough to know when to look the other way and when to step in. Sheriff, Derek said, relief flooding his voice. These men are harassing me, threatening me. That's funny, Sheriff Cole said, not smiling. Because Dr. Singh filed a report 3 days ago about child abandonment and neglect, and Karen Miller from CPS mentioned you by name. There's an active investigation. Derek, you left your family without food, without money, without care. Derek's face drained of color. Now, I could arrest you right now, the sheriff continued. Or you can make this easy. Sign over temporary custody to your wife. Agree to supervised visitation only and get yourself into an addiction program. You can't make me. No, but a judge can and will. Sheriff Cole pulled out a folded paper. This is a restraining order. You stay 500 feet away from that farmhouse and those kids until you prove you're not a danger to them. Derek stared at the paper like it was a snake. Sign it, Jack said quietly. Or don't. Your choice. But if you go near that house, if you try to see those kids, if you so much as drive down that road, we'll know. And next time we won't just talk. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Derek's hand shook as he took the pen Sheriff Cole offered. He signed, his signature barely legible. Good choice, the sheriff said, pocketing the paper. Now get out of my town. Derek stood, looked at the bikers surrounding him. Men who'd done more for his family in 3 days than he'd done in years. And something broke in his expression. Shame, maybe, or just the realization of what he'd lost. Tell Shauna, he started. No, Vince cut him off. You don't get to send messages. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. You lost that right. Derek nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket and walked out of the bar. They watched through the window as he got into his truck and drove away. Tail lights disappearing into the darkness. The bar erupted in whispers. Jack turned to Sheriff Cole. "Thank you," the sheriff shrugged. "Dr. Singh's a friend. She told me what you boys have been doing out there." He studied Jack with sharp eyes. "I've known you and your crew for years. Caused me headaches more than once. But this," he nodded slowly, "this is good work. Keep it up." As they walked out, Falcon spoke up. "What if he comes back anyway? Restraining order or not?" "Then we deal with it," Jack said simply. But as they rode back to the farmhouse, Jack couldn't shake the image of Derek Williams' face. Broken, ashamed, angry. A man who'd thrown away everything and was only now realizing what it cost. They pulled up at the farmhouse. Inside, the lights were warm. Through the window, they saw Shauna laughing at something Marcus said. Lila was dancing with Shadow to music from an old radio. A family healing, growing, living. And they'd made sure the man who tried to destroy it couldn't come back and finish the job. It felt like victory. But something told Jack this wasn't over yet. Karen Miller returned exactly 1 week later, clipboard in hand, skepticism still etched on her face. What she found made her pause at the doorway. The farmhouse yard had been transformed. The weeds were cut, the porch was repaired and painted, solar lights lined the pathway. Alex's idea, paid for with money pooled from the crew. Through the window, she saw Shauna at the kitchen counter actually cooking real food, chicken and vegetables, not canned soup. Inside, Karen conducted her inspection with the same thoroughness as before, but this time the difference was undeniable. Lila's room had been painted pale yellow. There were curtains on the windows, hand-sewn by a woman from Falcon's AA meeting who wanted to help. Books lined a shelf Bear had built. The little girl showed Karen her new stuffed bear with pride. "Bear won it for me at the fair," Lila said, hugging it tight. "He threw rings and won on his first try." "Did he now?" Karen made a note. In Marcus's room, homework was organized on a desk Thorne had salvaged and refinished. A calendar on the wall showed check marks for chores completed, stars for good behavior, structure, routine, stability. Karen interviewed Shauna again. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Williams?" "Better." Shauna's voice was stronger than last week. "I started counseling. Dr. Singh connected me with a psychiatrist who adjusts medication costs based on income. I can actually afford it now." She paused. "And I've been applying for jobs. Vince helped me update my resume. The biker helped with your resume. He was an EMT before he joined the club. He knows how to make things look professional." Shauna smiled slightly. "He's been practicing interview questions with me. So have the others. Jack makes me answer while he times me. Says I need to stop apologizing for everything." Karen's pen hovered over her clipboard. "And the children? How are they adjusting? Marcus's nightmares have stopped. He sleeps through the night now." "And Lila." Shauna's voice caught with emotion. She talks now, full sentences. She tells me about her day. She laughs. Because of the bikers. Because we're not alone anymore. Shauna met Karen's eyes. "I'm not saying they're perfect. Colossus curses sometimes, and has to put money in Lila's swear jar. Shadow is paranoid about everything. He checks the locks 5 times before he leaves. But they show up. Every single day. They're teaching Marcus to ride a bicycle. They're reading bedtime stories to Lila. They're helping me become the mother I should have been all along." Karen interviewed the children next. Lila was more animated, describing how Bear taught her to draw flowers, and Falcon showed her how to whistle. Marcus talked about Colossus helping with his math homework, and Alex teaching him about motorcycles. "Do you feel safe?" Karen asked Marcus. Yes, ma'am. What about when your father came back? Marcus's face grew serious. Jack told us about it. Said Dad signed papers and can't come here anymore. Said we never have to see him unless we want to. He looked at Karen directly. I don't want to. He hurt Mom. He left us. Jack and the others, they're more family than he ever was. Outside, Karen found Jack and Vince working on the old barn, replacing rotted boards. Mr. Thompson, can we talk? Jack climbed down from the ladder, wiping sweat from his face. Is there a problem? That's what I'm trying to determine. Karen consulted her notes. You've been here every day for a week. Your entire club has been rotating shifts. Who's running your regular lives? Your jobs? Your responsibilities? We're managing, Jack said simply. That's not an answer. Vince spoke up. I took leave from my construction job. Alex is working nights so he can be here during the day. The others adjust their schedules. We make it work. For how long? A week is easy. A month is harder. 6 months. Karen's voice was sharp. What happens when it stops being new and exciting? When it becomes tedious? When you have to choose between your own needs and theirs? Jack met her eyes. Then we choose them. Words, Mr. Thompson. Just words. No. Jack's voice was firm. It's a promise, and I don't break promises anymore. Karen studied him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She closed her clipboard. I spoke with Sheriff Cole, with Dr. Singh, with your AA sponsor, Mr. Falcon. She paused. Also ran background checks on all of you. Found some interesting things. The bikers tensed. 3 of you have prior convictions. 2 for assault, 1 for theft. That was you, Mr. Shadow. 4 of you have struggled with addiction. 2 have failed marriages with estranged children. Karen's voice wasn't judgmental, just factual. You're not model citizens. You're not the kind of people the system typically trusts with vulnerable children. We know that, Vince said quietly. But Karen continued. You're also the only reason this family is still together. Shauna's depression is being treated. The children are thriving. The house is safe and stable. And every single person I spoke with, from the sheriff to the doctor to the woman at the food bank, told me the same thing. The Iron Riders showed up and changed everything. She opened her briefcase and pulled out papers. This is a formal agreement. The state will allow Shauna to retain custody with ongoing monitoring. You, she gestured at the bikers, will be listed as approved support network. That means background checks for anyone who spends unsupervised time with the children. That means random visits from me. That means if anything goes wrong, you're all held accountable. Jack stared at the papers. You're serious? I'm giving you a chance to prove me wrong about bikers with criminal records. Karen held out a pen. Don't make me regret it. One by one, each biker signed. Their signatures, some neat, some barely legible, represented a commitment none of them had ever made before. When the last signature was done, Karen gathered the papers. I'll be back in 2 weeks, then monthly for 6 months. If everything remains stable, we'll reassess. She walked to her car, then turned back. Mr. Thompson, for what it's worth, what you're doing here, it matters more than you probably realize. After she left, the bikers stood in silence. We really just signed up for 6 months of social worker visits, Shadow said finally. Yep, Jack confirmed. Random checks, background investigations, the whole system watching everything we do, that's the deal. Shadow was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. Worth it? Yeah. Bear rumbled in agreement. It is. That evening they told Shauna about the agreement. She cried, the good kind of tears this time. She hugged each of them. This broken woman and these broken men, all of them healing together. Marcus asked Jack, Does this mean you're staying? Really staying? Jack knelt down to his level. Kid, we're not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. Marcus threw his arms around Jack's neck, holding on like he was afraid to let go, and Jack held him back. This boy who'd saved them as much as they'd saved him. Outside, the sun set over the farmhouse. The motorcycles sat in a neat row in the driveway. The lights inside glowed warm against the darkening sky. It wasn't perfect. There would be hard days ahead. Struggles, setbacks, moments when they'd want to quit. But they wouldn't. Because 8 outlaws had made a promise, and for once in their lives, they were going to keep it. 5 months passed, like chapters in a book nobody expected to read. The farmhouse that had once been a monument to abandonment and despair became something else entirely. The paint didn't peel anymore. The porch didn't sag. Flowers grew in boxes that Bear built and Lila painted. A tire swing hung from the pine tree in the yard. Colossus's handiwork, tested thoroughly by Marcus before Lila was allowed near it. Shauna got a job at the local library, part-time at first, then full-time when they saw how reliable she was. She'd gained weight, healthy weight, and her eyes had light in them again. She attended therapy every Wednesday. The bikers made sure she never missed an appointment. Lila started kindergarten. On her first day, she insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple with flowers, and carrying the lunchbox Alex had bought her. Bear walked her to the classroom, his massive frame barely fitting through the tiny doorway. The teacher's eyes went wide, but Lila grabbed his hand and announced proudly, "This is my Uncle Bear. He's the best." The teacher didn't argue. Marcus joined the school's bike club. Jack taught him to ride properly, with Thorne advising and shouting instructions about balance and braking. The day Marcus rode a full mile without stopping, the whole crew cheered like he'd won a championship. Karen Miller's visits became routine. Monthly, then bi-monthly. Each time she came, she found the same thing. Stability, progress, a family that was healing. On her final scheduled visit, she sat at the kitchen table with Shauna, reviewing the case file. Your depression is managed. You're employed. The children are healthy, attending school, showing no signs of trauma or neglect. Karen looked up. Mrs. Williams, I'm recommending case closure. You don't need state supervision anymore. Shauna's hand flew to her mouth. Really? Really? Karen allowed herself a small smile. You did the work. You and your unusual support system. Outside, the unusual support system was teaching Lila to throw a football. She couldn't throw far, but she was determined. And every attempt was met with exaggerated enthusiasm from grown men who'd seen combat and prison, but acted like she'd just won the Super Bowl. Karen watched through the window. I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of outcomes, many of them bad. She closed the file. This is the first time I've seen a motorcycle club save a family. I wasn't sure I'd ever write these words, but they're good for you. For the kids. Shauna wiped tears from her eyes. They saved us. All of us. No, you all saved each other. That night, Jack called a club meeting at the farmhouse. Everyone gathered around the kitchen table, the same table where they'd first found empty cupboards and desperation. Karen closed the case. Jack announced, Shauna and the kids are officially stable. No more state supervision. Cheers erupted. Bear lifted Lila onto his shoulders. Marcus high-fived Vince. Shauna laughed. Really laughed, for the first time in years. But Jack continued, raising his hand for quiet. I've been thinking. We stumbled into this. We found one kid on one road. But how many other kids are out there? How many other families falling apart with nobody to catch them? The room went silent. I'm not saying we can save everyone, Jack said, but we saved this one. And if we could do it once... He trailed off, letting them finish the thought. Falcon spoke first. You're talking about making this official, a real mission. I'm saying we got something here. Resources, skills, a network. What if we used it? Vince nodded slowly. There are programs, organizations that connect volunteers with at-risk families. We could partner with them. We need structure, Thorne added. Maybe non-profit status, funding. Can't do everything out of pocket forever. I know a lawyer who owes me a favor, Shadow said. Could help with the paperwork. Alex pulled out his phone. I'm already designing a logo. Iron Riders, riding for forgotten kids. Jack looked at Shauna. What do you think? She smiled through tears. I think you're going to change a lot of lives. 3 months later, the Iron Riders held their largest charity ride yet. Over 200 motorcycles gathered in the town square. The local news was there. Cameras, reporters. People who had once whispered about the scary bikers now lined the streets with signs of support. At the front of the formation, Jack sat on his motorcycle. But he wasn't alone. Marcus sat in front of him, wearing a child-sized helmet that Falcon had custom-painted with flames. The boy's hands gripped the handlebars, his face split in the biggest grin anyone had ever seen. You ready, kid? Jack asked. Ready, Marcus shouted. Behind them, the other riders revved their engines, a thunderous roar of chrome and horsepower. But this time, it wasn't intimidating. It was triumphant. A banner stretched across the lead bikes. Iron Riders, riding for forgotten kids. Shauna stood on the sidewalk with Lila, who waved enthusiastically. The little girl was wearing a tiny leather vest, a gift from the club, with her name embroidered on it. Lila Williams, Honorary Iron Rider. Karen Miller stood nearby, clipboard-free for once. She caught Jack's eye and gave him a nod of respect. Sheriff Cole directed traffic, wearing a slight smile. Dr. Singh waved from the crowd. Even the town mayor had shown up to give a speech about community and second chances. The ride would take them through 3 counties, ending at a children's hospital where they'd deliver toys and donations. But more than that, they'd deliver hope. Proof that sometimes the people society writes off are the ones who show up when it matters most. Jack revved his engine. The sound echoed off the buildings, powerful and alive. He thought about that day 5 months ago. A crying boy stumbling out of the trees. A desperate plea. A choice to follow when it would have been easier to ride away. That choice had changed everything. All right, Marcus, Jack called over the roar of engines. Wave to your mom and sister. Marcus waved with both hands, bouncing with excitement. Now hold on tight, Jack said. We've got a mission. The convoy rolled forward, 200 motorcycles moving as one. A brotherhood that had found its purpose. Men who'd spent years running from their pasts, now riding toward their futures. At the back of the formation, Bear rode with Lila's stuffed bear strapped to his bike. She'd insisted he take it for good luck. Falcon rode beside Vince, both of them sober and steady. Thorne, Shadow, Colossus, and Alex flanked the sides, protective and proud. They weren't perfect. They still made mistakes. Some days were harder than others. But they showed up. They kept their promises. They did the work. Because one little boy had run out of the trees crying, "Please follow me home." And they had followed him into something bigger than any of them could have imagined. Into redemption, into family, into a mission that would echo through countless lives yet to be saved. The motorcycles disappeared down the highway, their roar fading into the distance. But the impact they left behind, on Shauna, on Lila, on Marcus, on a town that learned not to judge by appearances, on each other, that would last forever. Sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes they're the ones everyone else gave up on. Sometimes they're outlaws on motorcycles who hear a child crying and decide that this time they're not going to ride away. This time they're going to stay. And that makes all the difference.